The book that I'm going to read today is called Henri's Scissors by Jeanette Winter. And since it just says by Jeanette Winter, we can assume that she's both the author and the illustrator. So she did both. And on this end paper, there's a quote and it says, Matisse got as close as anyone can get to heaven with a pair of scissors. Henri's Scissors by Jeanette Winter. In a small weaving town in France, a young boy named Henri Emile Benoit Matisse watched his mother paint china. He wanted to paint too. He drew pictures in the sand and he drew pictures in his school books. When Henri was a young man, he drew pictures in his law books and on contracts, on deeds and wills. Henri was sick in bed with appendicitis one winter, and his mother gave him a box of paints, and he painted until he was well again. He kept on painting, he forgot about law, and he left his small town to be an artist in Paris. And here's a little picture of, we know it's Paris because here's a little picture of the Eiffel Tower. Henri painted pictures day after day and year after year. He was happy and his paintings made people happy. Let's see if we can see that. Oops, no, here. I really like this picture because it shows a lot of the paintings that he really did do. But when Matisse was an old man, he fell ill. So ill he couldn't paint, so ill he couldn't sit up, so ill he could only lie in bed and sleep. His paintings floated by in his dreams. Not right now, Zachy. I'm trying to read a story. I'll answer you in about 5 minutes, okay? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Matisse finally opened his eyes, and they were filled with sadness. Now he must remain in bed or use a wheelchair. Would he ever have the energy to paint again? When Matisse was strong enough to travel, he went to the seaside. The sea air might help him get well. Before long, he sat up, and a little later, he drew. Then one day, Matisse picked up a pair of scissors and cut out shapes from painted paper. He was drawing with scissors. A pair of scissors is a wonderful instrument, he says. I wonder what shapes you would cut out with scissors. I recognize some of these shapes as ones that I can name, and other shapes, I don't know what I would call this. But I know I would call this a heart. But what would we call this shape? Matisse cut paper all day. My pleasure in cutting things out grows even greater. Why didn't I think of this earlier? His assistants painted paper for him all day. What an interesting idea. So instead of using colored paper or construction paper, he had people paint white paper different colors for him. I wonder why he chose to do it that way. It seems to me that I am in a second life. Paper cutouts covered his walls. I'm wondering how some of the walls in your house look. Do you have artwork hanging on the walls? Do you put your own artwork on the walls? I noticed that this leaf shape here kind of looks like the same leaf shape here and also here. I wonder if that's where he got his inspiration from. One evening, Matisse lay in bed and drew the faces of his grandchildren. He drew them on the ceiling with a piece of chalk tied to a long pole. As he fell asleep, they looked down on him and saw his dreams. They saw the shapes that surrounded him in his sleep. Look at the little birdie with him. I see a lot more shapes here that I recognize. I see a bird, a heart. This to me kind of looks like a sun or a star. This looks like an orange to me. An orange circle with 2 green leaves. And I wonder what this to me looks like a person. What do you think the shapes are? What would this one be? As time went on, Matisse cut bigger and bigger shapes. They filled his seaside room with color. You see, as I'm obliged to stay often in bed, I have made a little garden all around me where I can walk. There are leaves, fruit, and a bird. He must really like birds because he seems to have them as pets. I really like this picture. This is a very famous cutout that he did. It's a picture of a very famous cutout that he did. It says, I am deeply contented and happy. He feels really good. These cutouts must be gigantic. If he is this size and these cutouts are this size, this must be huge. Then one night, Matisse walked out into his paper garden, and the rainbow of shapes cradled the old artist and carried him into the heavens. And the book ends with a question. Are some of the stars that we see at night coming to us from Henri's scissors? Perhaps. I wonder if he's still cutting. And the end paper here again has another quote by somebody else. It says, by a person named John Russell, who wrote for the New York Times. He said, though produced by a very old man who was mortally ill, the cutouts seem to come from the springtime of the world. It's really interesting because right now, when I'm reading this book, it's spring. And a lot of his cutouts looked like leaves and things like that. I wonder if he was trying to make spring using scissors and paper. And this is a note from the author, and she signed it J.W. for Jeanette Winters. And this is how she tells us how she made, how she created this book and how she got inspired. Henri Matisse was born in Le Casteau, Cambrésis, France in 1869. That's so long ago. And he lived most of his life in Paris, where he was in the forefront of avant-garde painting. That's the style of painting that a lot of artists were doing. At age 72, Matisse became seriously ill and he survived surgery. His body was frail, but not his spirit. Matisse began anew with colored paper and a pair of scissors. He died in Nice, France in 1954. So that was quite a long time ago. It's almost 70 years ago, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I had only seen reproductions of his large cutouts until I visited the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. in 2011. We're in Washington, D.C. right now. I wonder if his work is still there. When I saw the enormous wall-size images there, I felt I was inside Matisse's garden, surrounded by his colors and his shapes. That experience was the impetus for this book. Most helpful to me as I worked there were Matisse's own words, especially those from his correspondence with his old friend, writer André Rouvière, which can be found in Matisse, A Second Life. That must be the name of the exhibit. Amazing. What a great story. I love it. I'm wondering what artwork you could create using scissors. And would you paint paper or would you find paper that was already colored? Maybe you can cut out cardboard. You can cut like different materials. I wonder what kind of collage work or other kinds of art you might make. I hope that you have a good time using scissors, and I hope that you make lots of great art, and I hope that it makes you happy. Thanks.